great honors of my life is Jürgen Habermas, who's one of the greatest thinkers alive in deliberative democracy, and he blurbs the book. And I exchanged what you're doing in Taiwan with him, and he was very intrigued because his whole theory is that this deliberative process will lead to better decision-making and truth, and you're sort of putting his theory into practice.
Excellent. I'm really honored to hear that. Good local time, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Innovative Minds with Audrey Tang. Our guests to date include academics, net neutrality advocates, and politicians. Let's welcome Mr. Khanna. Good local time, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Innovative Minds with Audrey Tang. Our guests to date include academics, net neutrality advocates, and politicians, but rarely have we had a chance to meet someone like our guest today who is all of these at the same time. He is the sitting U.S. member of Congress from Silicon Valley, the author of a new book, Dignity in the Digital Age. Let's welcome Mr. Khanna. Hi, Ro. Thank you very much for your time.
Audrey, it's a real pleasure to be here. You're a great leader on technology issues, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. The first question is a very simple one. What is the day like? Because I understand it's about 7 p.m. Your time for a U.S. Congressman.
Well, today was a very exciting day. We passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which is really the biggest investment in climate that America has ever made, $370 billion, tax cuts for solar, for wind, for battery, for electric vehicles. I was negotiating with Senator Manchin for almost a year on this, and of course it was great to see it come together. So it's a particularly exciting day today on Capitol Hill.
Congratulations. And there's another act, the Chips and Science Act, that you have been also a promoter, right, of the act. And that was also quite recent. It was signed into law on August 9th this month. It's originally, if I understand correctly, based on your Endless Frontier Act. Is that correct?
Yes, you've done your homework. Senator Schumer and I introduced it. It was bipartisan with Representative Gallagher and Senator Young. And it puts a massive investment to say we have to make semiconductors in the United States. You know, we invented the semiconductor chip, as you know, both Bob Noyce at Intel and at Texas Instruments came up with it, but we didn't care about the production. And a lot of the production has gone to Taiwan. Some of it now is starting in China. And this bill says, no, we've got to make the chips in the United States, $50 billion to do that. And we're going to see 2 new factories starting in Ohio as a result of it.
All right, so between the act you passed today and the CHIPS Act, I believe at the beginning of this year, President Biden said that this century will be the American century in terms of innovation. Do you share that belief?
Yes, I do, and I'll tell you why. I think what gives America the advantage is that we have people literally from around the world. We're the only country, we're 60% white, but 40% not white, and it's people from India, where my parents are, from Taiwan, from China, from Japan, from Europe, from South America, from Africa. And so when you have this infusion of perspective and this interchange, I think that is the model for innovation, because innovation often requires a fresh pair of eyes, a fresh perspective. And so the immigrant spirit of America, being a nation of immigrants, is something that lends itself to innovation.
So infinite diversity in infinite combinations,
Exactly.
and collaboration across the unlikely the diversity, and the same spirit you've also written about that in a new book in February this year, Dignity in the Digital Age, that addresses the digital divide, especially in the U.S. And I find it very refreshing that you said that digital economy, far from automating away all the jobs and something like that, can create new opportunities for all people, all across the country, regardless of their skill set and so on for the moment, right? So please tell us more about your hope for the U.S. economy from a digital perspective.
Thanks, Audrey. Well, I started out the book actually on purpose, writing about someone who was a mechanic in the coal industry who came from manufacturing, and I show how after a 9-month course, Alex Hughes is working in technology, but it's not coding for Google. It's a technology building refrigerators, which require electronic sensors. And that's the thing about the digital economy that I try to make the case in the book, that the 25 million new jobs are going to be in manufacturing, in retail, in healthcare. Many of them don't require college degrees. In the United States, it's been too concentrated. It's only been a lot of these jobs in 10 metropolitan cities. But post-COVID, we've realized that you can decentralize them, that you don't have to have every job or company in Silicon Valley or New York. You can have people getting these credentials in rural America, in smaller cities, and doing that work and making twice the median income. So the first half of the book is all about how we democratize the innovation economy to bring prosperity to places left out. The second half of the book, which deals with deliberative democracy, I cite you very favorably because you have had an experiment of using technology not to polarize or divide, but to have a deliberative process. And you should feel proud, at least, one of the great honors of my life is Jürgen Habermas, who's one of the greatest thinkers alive in deliberative democracy, and he blurbs the book. And I exchanged what you're doing in Taiwan with him, and he was very intrigued because his whole theory is that this deliberative process will lead to better decision-making and truth, and you're sort of putting his theory into practice.
Excellent. I'm really honored to hear that. I think the French a couple years ago referred to the work in Taiwan and here as Habermas 3.0. So thank you for bringing the discussion to him. So the other thing I want to highlight is that actually 10 years ago you already published a book on the entrepreneurial nation, which is why manufacturing is still key to America's future. So you just mentioned the kind of re-decentralization of manufacturing, which is a great trend enabled partly by the COVID crisis. Are there any other trends in world trade or in automation and so on in the past decade or so that you think should be highlighted between your that book and this book?
Yeah, so I made the case back in a decade ago that production matters for a country, manufacturing matters. We made a colossal mistake in America that we let our industry leave. And the businesses are the ones who made industrial policy for a country, and their industrial policy was to locate it not in the United States. As a result, our trade deficit with China has gone from $80 billion in 2000 to almost $350 billion today. That's bad for our working class and middle class because it has meant that those high-paying manufacturing jobs aren't there. Even if you have automation, that should mean we want our manufacturing jobs because the workers will be more productive. They'll be getting paid a premium wage, and that will have a multiplier effect in the community. So it may be fewer jobs with automation, but those are going to be high-paying jobs, and that'll lead to other jobs. But by shipping off our entire manufacturing sector in many places, we've really hurt the working class in this country. We also, in my view, and I said this to the ambassador of China, have created the conditions for, unfortunately, resentment and instability. When you look at the Opium War in the 1800s, Britain was totally wrong to colonize China. I mean, it was wrong to do it, and they sold Indian opium to get Chinese addicted, and they were in the wrong. But the cause of it, one of the causes was the structural trade deficit. China was refusing to buy from the West. Now, that doesn't mean that it justified British colonialism, but the lesson we should learn is that trade deficits of that magnitude are never good because they lead to resentment. They lead to people in America saying, where are our jobs? And it is in both countries' interest to rebalance the production. And America needs to be more deliberate and intentional about how we do that.
Excellent. And in 2018, you have introduced the Internet Bill of Rights, which seems a real intersection of all the expertise that you just highlighted in our previous couple of questions. It includes technology, law, economics, politics, and so on. I was aware of that work because it was endorsed by the inventor of the World Web, Tim Berners-Lee. I was working on, of course, re-decentralizing web technologies for quite a while, and I've read all the kind of Bill of Rights from, for example, Barcelona and many places. But I think your take really uses a language, as I mentioned, that's truly intersectional, that gets the message through to people in different sectors. So can you tell us a little bit more about the Internet Bill of Rights and why it's an essential text of our time?
I appreciate that. I have a whole chapter on what Tim Berners-Lee and I came up with, and it's very simple. It basically says that you should have an inalienable right to your own data, and starts with that premise. Look, when you go into a store, you want to buy a shirt or try on pants, you don't give everything about you to the store owner. You don't tell them your favorite color, your favorite ice cream, everything about your history. And if you had that kind of intrusion, you wouldn't go into that store. And yet somehow when you go onto a store online or you visit a website online, people are okay with giving all this hordes of information about them. And that information can be weaponized. It can be weaponized to support a cause or a political candidate that you don't support. It can be weaponized to create social media profiles that lead to greater polarization or recruitment of groups that you may not believe are healthy for society. So the first thing I say is you need to affirmatively dictate and decide what people can do with your data. And from that central premise, everything else follows. And obviously we can get into, people who are interested can get into the details of the 10 points, but that is the crux of what Tim Berners-Lee and I believe.
Excellent. Yeah, for our audience who want to learn more, just read the Internet Bill of Rights. I think it's excellently put together. In 2017, here in Taiwan, we had a user experience designer who signed on an internet petition that said, and I quote, the text filing experience is explosively hostile, end of quote. And then we end up holding the deliberative workshops you just mentioned with everybody who find the text filing experience horrible. And then we redesigned the text filing experience for later that year. And now, of course, everyone can use their phone and very easily get a text filed. Now, that marks a change in the Taiwanese political culture to stop saying websites and start saying experiences. And we're aware that you're starting pretty much the same movement in the US in May 2018. You introduced the act that called the 21st Century Integrated Digital Experience Act, a law that promotes the modernization and friendliness of US government agencies' websites. So now we're also seeing the design guides starting to refer the websites as experiences because it was signed into law by President Donald Trump on December 20 that year. So tell us more, what motivates you to propose this law?
Well, you've been ahead of the curve, Audrey. You've really been one of the world leaders in innovative design for government services. But why I proposed the law, and I write about this as well, is I represent Silicon Valley, which is the heart of innovative design. I mean, Steve Jobs was a brilliant, creative soul who focused more on design than on the technical details. And Airbnb's success, Apple's success, Google's success, a lot of it is design. It's the ease with which you can navigate their products and use their products. And yet when you go on the government websites, this happened after COVID, and you would go for information and it would be a maze. You'd have 50 different boxes, small hyperlinks, just a bombardment of text, and people would feel just overwhelmed, and it would be a total chore as opposed to a delight when you use some of the private technologies. And so we said you have to center the user, you have to center the citizen, and then design technology around them. And that's what the IDEA Act is supposed to do. And if we can make government, people's interaction with government more pleasant, more empowering, then maybe they'll believe that government can have a bigger role in supporting education and healthcare and the things that many progressives like I believe in.
Excellent. So it's about building mutual trust in the integrity of the experience between the government and the people. Excellent. Now I want to focus a little bit about your life and your political values. You've been representing Silicon Valley since 2017, right? And before that, you served as Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Department of Commerce under President Obama. And you were also a visiting lecturer of economics at Stanford, and you taught law at Santa Clara. Of course, you authored many books. We talk about that. So among these multiple roles that extend from politics to academics, which one do you enjoy the most?
Well, I love being in the United States Congress. I know that may be not obvious to say and not fashionable to say, but it is an incredible honor to be one of the 535 lawmakers in this country that gets a say on the direction of the world's largest economy, the world's most powerful nation, and what we're going to do on climate, what we're going to do on technology. And many times it's frustrating, but you do have a say in shaping the direction of the country. And I believe that despite Donald Trump, despite some of the polarization, the future of America is going to be one of a multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy. And being part of that is exhilarating. But I'll say that the academic background allows me to bring some of these ideas. I don't have novel ideas. I take the ideas of really original thinkers, people like Habermas or Amartya Sen or others, and I try to translate them into politics. And that is, I think, at politics at its best is at the intersection of ideas and action.
That's innovation in practice, putting ideas in action. An idea you've put into action is the No PAC caucus in the House in 2017. You started that with two other members, O'Rourke and Polis. So that means that you, if I get that right, you refuse all contribution from those political action committees. Tell us why you think it was an important step to take and how to increase this kind of transparency or a re-decentralized accountability in political funding.
Well, I take no money from the corporations or from any of the organized political interest groups. This makes a big difference because otherwise people would say, oh, Roe represents Silicon Valley. Is he getting all this money from Apple and Google and all these companies? Now, I'm very proud that individuals from those places may support me, but they're strictly limited in a very small maximum of giving $2,900. But the PACs can give $10,000 each, and they make you sign these forms. And then if you take that money, then you have to really pay attention to their views on antitrust, their views on privacy, and it compromises your independence. So not taking PAC money gives me more independence. But it's easy for me because I come from a district with a lot of more affluent people. It's much harder if you have a district that's not affluent, and that's why the urgent challenge for America is to have campaign finance reform, to make every voter a donor or to have some public funding of elections. It's one of the things in our democracy that really is not working.
Yeah, in Taiwan, we have earmarked part of the budget that is directly proportional to the votes that you received from the votes from the election. The other idea that I've heard you putting into action is to design a term limit for members of Congress. So instead of something that you personally do, you're trying to set a 12-year term limit. Can you elaborate on that reason?
I haven't reached 12 years, and the reason it has to be a collective action problem is because otherwise you don't get to be in leadership. You have to pay your dues. If everyone did it, then you could go and lead and then have your impact and leave. But I think both for members of Congress and senators, having some term limits, whether it's 12 years, 18 years, would be good because it would give a new generation the opportunity to have a voice. I don't know how it is in Taiwan. In our country right now, we've had our leadership has been there 30, 40 years. And so it's hard for the newer voices to emerge.
Yeah, we have at-large MPs, which tends to be younger, but we also have the constituents-based MPs, who tends to be more senior. So it's a more hybrid approach. As a member of Congress, what are your thoughts about the President Obama's signature policy, the Open Government Partnership, which is an international alliance to further the transparency, participation, accountability, and now inclusion?
I thought it was really an important achievement. President Obama really believed in ethics. He believed in transparency. He believed in accountability and openness. He believed that the internet and transparency could help bring the world closer together to tackle problems like climate, to tackle problems like the pandemic. And it's unfortunate since his time, there's been an inward shift in America, a polarization and a parochialism that Donald Trump represented. But I do think Obama's approach of a multiracial, multi-ethnic America that was more transparent, that was more willing to collaborate with other countries, more open about how decisions are made, is the model that the new generation seeks and will build for the future.
Yeah, we firmly believe that. It really inspired me when I first saw the Open Government Partnership, and that's how I got so motivated into working in civic affairs and then public affairs. Yeah, so it had a...
Does President Obama know that he inspired
no,
you?
I don't think so.
Well, next time I see him, I will let him know.
Yeah. So how about you? How did you step into politics and public service? It seems that your grandpa has something to do with your choice.
Yes, my grandfather is one of my heroes. He was part of India's independence movement. He spent 4 years in jail alongside Gandhi in the 1940s with Quit India. He was in the independence movement for 15 years. So he had a view of human rights, of justice, of the importance of politics in shaping people's destiny. And I, when I was young, was very opposed to the war in Iraq. I was very much for a more just American foreign policy. And that's probably what got me started in American politics.
So given your background, you were born into a immigration family from India in the 70s. According to your own story and background, how would you describe to people in Taiwan the so-called American dream today? And has its essence changed between the 70s and now?
The American dream is still alive and well for many people in my district who see the world as their oyster, who wake up and drive by Apple, Google, Intel, Yahoo, Cisco, LinkedIn, who live in a district that's 50% Asian American, Latino American as well, African American, Caucasian American, a truly multiracial, multi-ethnic place. But the American dream at the same time, unfortunately, has slipped away for too many Americans. The working class and middle class in America has lost 25% of wealth since 1980. We've seen plant after plant close. One of the reasons that our politics are so polarized is you've had unprecedented wealth generation in my district. In Dignity in a Digital Age, I start by describing $10 trillion of wealth in my district. I mean, think about that, $10 trillion. And yet other places totally desolated, deindustrialized, young people being told, leave your hometowns. So our country has a lot of stress because the American dream is not as available for many who built America. And that was a central theme that Trump exploited and other politicians have raised. A legitimate anger people have. And the challenge is, how do we fix this? How do we get that economic opportunity, not just to the some in my district, but to everyone?
So in Taiwan, we put a lot of focus on digital competence, media competence, and also higher education for all, which is, of course, as we understand, it's also something that you focus on, which is education. Just a while ago, you called for canceling students' loan, which may help higher education as well. You were teaching in universities for years, so any experience back then has influenced your view on shaping the educational, especially higher education policies now?
Yes, I had $100,000 of loans to finish my education, and I couldn't pay them back for a year. I had to go on forbearance. Now, I was very lucky in life, and now I've paid them back. But I know many people who haven't been able to. And it's absurd that in the United States of America, you have to be $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in debt just to finish education. We should have free public college, four-year college. We should forgive the student debt for those who are middle class and lower middle class and working class. How much do you have in debt, or how much do you have to pay for a year or 4 years in college in Taiwan? I imagine it's insignificant compared to the US costs.
That's right, and we have a program where you take a kind of stint in working after the senior high school for 2 years, and that by itself will help repay later on the undergrad. So it's like a gap year of 2 years between the...
Does everyone have to do it?
No, not really. It's opted in. But it increases the chance that people will go to the undergrad studies with a firmer grasp on what kind of issues they're interested in, with some industrial experience. So that helps to repay the student loan as well.
What percent of people opt in?
So in the first couple years, we're facing like a lot of people were interested, but not a lot of their parents are down with that idea in 2016, 17, because in Taiwan, when you're 18 years old, you have the right on the kind of doing a lot of things, but not signing contracts. So the civil rights didn't start the adulthood until 20 years old. So there's a 2-year gap between when you're 18 and when you're 20, where you can do some of the things and be liable to all the damages, but not the full civil rights. And so this year, we're doing a sweeping change, not just the civil code, but also the constitution change, hopefully to be put to referenda later this year, so that everything will start when you're 18 years old. So to answer your question, a large percentage of 18 years old were interested, but only a small fraction of their parents are down with that idea.
That makes sense. I understand that.
Their parents, if they don't sign, because they're not legally adult by the law yet, so they were not successful in doing this two-year gap. But on the other hand, because starting this year, 18 years old will be like fully adults, and hopefully for voting as well, we may see higher uptake of this program next year.
Wonderful. And one final question on this: how much does it cost on a 4-year average? Let's say you don't do this program to finish college.
Yeah, so if it's a public university, I don't think that's much. I think it's about 10,000 US dollars or so, which is quite reasonable. But I'm not speaking from personal experience. I'm a middle school dropout, so I've never entered college. But I heard
Wow,
that,
so you're self-taught.
Yeah,
like
I'm
entirely
self-educated on the internet, on Internet Archives, on the Gutenberg Archive, later on Wikipedia, and so on. Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's incredible.
Well, it's also why I think the internet, including ASCII, right? The A in ASCII stands for American. There's a lot of the American liberal values within the design of the internet. So having been brought up on internet and the internet culture, I feel very close, as I mentioned, to the, say, Open Government Partnership and other initiative from America that has this nature of freeing up the internet, as you said.
That's wonderful. Yeah. What a great story, a powerful story.
Thank you. So about freeing the internet, recently we've signed on the Declaration for the Future of the Internet, and the Biden administration has signaled re-strengthening of a lot of Indo-Pacific cooperation with like-minded partners in many aspects. especially on emerging technologies, on space, and on cybersecurity, cultivating next generation talent. Indeed, the website of my ministry, the Ministry of Digital Affairs, uses this new US-based technology called interplanetary file system to resist cyber attacks so that it can be distributed in like 200 different countries in a distributed way. So how do you see Taiwan's contribution as a technological partner and the possibility of more future collaboration with the US?
It's critical. The economic partnership is critical. The partnership in innovation is critical. I mean, in as areas you have said, in cybersecurity and space and submarine technology. Of course, our military assistance is critical. And our relationship is one that enhances the world. It tackles joint problems and is in America's benefit economically. So it's a relationship that I strongly support. Of course, our speaker, as you know, with a number of members, was just in Taiwan, and I had supported her trip there.
Excellent. And well, in your constituency in Silicon Valley, during the 2 years of COVID, a lot of my friends in Silicon Valley was physically in Taiwan. A while ago, I spoke to YouTube co-founder Steve Chen in this show. And he said that during COVID, Taipei was almost transformed into Silicon Valley. Hundreds and hundreds of people just took the Taiwan Gold Card because we issue Taiwan Gold Card, which is our residency and work and health permit for 3 years, renewable, to anyone who've successfully or unsuccessfully founded a startup. So anyone with startup leadership experience is qualified to stay in Taiwan during the height of the COVID. Have you seen any potential sign that we can team up for linking the innovation scene in Silicon Valley now post-pandemic? As you said, that it's now really decentralized. People are much more comfortable with working in different time zones and so on. So are there opportunities that you see nowadays for more linking between our time zone and yours?
Yes, I mean, there's such a large Taiwanese community already in Silicon Valley, so obviously that lends itself to understanding the culture and the collaboration. And one of the exciting things is with TSMC, they're investing in new jobs in Arizona and creating jobs across America. And that is an exciting possibility that the collaboration with Taiwanese companies, entrepreneurs, venture capitalists will lead to innovation that is job creating in the United States and in Taiwan. But there is, I think, a great entrepreneurial spirit among many Taiwanese people, and that is resonates in Silicon Valley.
That's excellent. So I mentioned briefly that end of this year we'll have a election, and the 18 years old are special in that they can vote in the referendum, but not in the elections. So, but we will have a referendum by 20 years and older to determine whether the 18 years old get this full political participation rights in the future elections. Since you also place great importance on inspiring the youth to participate in civil affairs and to care about the fellow citizens. Do you have any advice to any 18 years old, not necessarily Taiwanese, in this digital era?
We need you. We need you. It's the young people who have the clearest sense of urgency about climate. I was talking to someone who was 18 who said she didn't know she wanted to have children because she didn't know 50 years from now the world would be a place where people would thrive. And that was very sad to me, but it shows the perspective that the 18-year-olds have on climate. 18-year-olds, many of them don't have prejudices of all of the conflicts of the past. They want to move past the divisions that the world has had. They want to be connected to people across the world and to bridge difference. So I am so hopeful for that generation, hopeful for what they can achieve. And it behooves us to give them a stronger voice.
Definitely. So with a shared urgency and a clarity of purpose, I think the 18 years old are leading the waves in this century to be more equitable, more inclusive, and also provide more economic opportunity for all. Thank you so much for your thoughtful answers. And as your career shows, hard work and economic opportunity really can change the course of many people's lives. And let's hope that we succeed in democratizing digital innovation to create a more inclusive society, both in the US and abroad. And we'd also like to thank you for your long-standing support for Taiwan as a US partner. As I know, you love watching movies and traveling, so you're cordially welcome to visit Taiwan anytime when your time allows in the future. But before that happens, please take some time to visit our website, TaiwanPlus.com, where you can also take an immediate virtual trip to Taiwan with several clicks.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Audrey. You're a wonderful leader in innovation, not just innovation for technology and innovation for democracy. How do we have a democracy in a digital age that empowers the voice of everyone, that gets the creativity of everyone participating? And if we can create that in Taiwan, in the United States, in the world, then we will have a better 21st century than the 20th century, which had so much division, so much hardship. So I look forward to working with you for many years to come.
Thank you all for joining today. Leave your comments and questions. We want you. Besides on our website and YouTube channels, InnoMinds is also available on the main podcast platforms. Subscribe now and enjoy more wonderful, innovative stories. Thank you again and see you next time. Live long and prosper.